Hey everybody, Dan Tomaszewski here with Everything MSP. Welcome to this week's episode of WTF Wednesdays. Each week we bring on a different business function expert to talk about their particular area of expertise. This week we are bringing on Jay McBain, who is the chief analyst for Canalys, and we're going to talk about unpackaging some emerging trends for modern MSPs. So much has evolved in our space and really looking for this conversation with Jay. So let's get started. Jay, I'm just trying to think back of when we first met. It's been a long time, probably 10
Probably
years at
15,
least,
15 years, maybe.
maybe 15. Yeah. I mean,
Yeah.
when was your Lenovo days?
That ended about 14 years ago. That was kind of
Okay.
I'm speaking at Lenovo tomorrow, of all things.
Are you really?
On the
Okay.
western side, they're bringing all their partners into Naples, Florida.
Oh,
So
nice.
it's like a
Nice.
homecoming for me when you get to talk to your partners that you served for 17 years, but haven't
Yeah.
been around in about 14 years after that. But
Right.
so yeah, for me, that's where it all started because I'll take you back. Here's insider information. I just moved from Canada. I was in the boardroom in Raleigh, North Carolina. A bunch of big wigs at Lenovo, including Yang Ching, was really engaged in this, and everybody's throwing ideas around the table. This is 2009, and somebody comes out with this idea about managed services. The industry at that point is about 10 years old. It's maturing. At this point, Arnie and Bob, stopped getting ejected from security out of small Holiday Inns in Wichita, Kansas, and Joe Panettiere was in his prime, writing all the deep knowledge, but it started coming into its own, and somebody around the boardroom table said, "Hey, can somebody go and figure that out?" And even back then, I was an analyst. So it didn't take
Okay.
long to figure out the PSAs and the RMMs, and here's the structure, and here's how the industry kind of works underneath. So who's going to call Arnie Bellini? Who's going to call Bob Gottgard? Who's going to call James Foxhall from Nebraska? Who's going to
Yeah.
call to the RSAs? The RMMs up in Canada, the level platforms of the world, and who's going to go meet Dan Wensley? And so it was kind of this big thing. And I just had a list of 50 people that I just cold called, and it was a short thing. As IBM kind of being the first PC, we held patents across the motherboard. So the trusted platform module and all the different technologies that went into it were actually ours. And Compaq at the time,
Mm.
HP, Dell, everybody else had to pay us a royalty of like a nickel or whatever to put those things on the motherboard. So these were the things that made remote management work. It's a thing that, the technologies that actually made managed services work.
Yeah.
That was the starting of this. Well, how would we create a program? How would we create something here that we could actually help the industry rather than just try to go sell to the industry?
Right.
And then everything took off from there.
Well, on the flip side, that's more you guys are like building the industry. On the flip side, as a consumer, if you will, as an IT service provider, I remember we had signed up a client. We had them on what we called a service pack, which was, the ability to, we would basically go out every other week. It was a recurring contract and, an X amount of dollars per month for that. And, and we had another opportunity come up and I just started Googling, you know, ability to manage multiple clients, the ability to manage, proactively. I'm just Googling stuff and I find out about this managed services thing, right? And I start finding like, oh, there's this tool, like Level Platforms was our first RMM. And we had them for about a year and things went south when they launched. I think it was either 5.0 or 6.0, and things just blew up. And then we moved over to Kaseya, and it was a massive investment at the time. I had to go to my business mentor and say, okay, look, this is going to be $60,000. We got to spend $60,000 to buy 1,000 licenses for Kaseya. And, so we just talked through the process and, our first two accounts, the first one, a couple grand a month. Second one was 4,500 a month. And so we started looking at the numbers. We're like, hey, this makes sense to spend the 60 grand because then, we've got all these seats that we can sell. And then that's how it kicked off for us. So really interesting. I love and do miss some of those early days because, it was so much, there was so much passion of, putting in place different tools to make this happen, to deliver a completely different level of service than the break fix world. And, instead of sitting back waiting for the phone to ring, we're working to ensure they don't have to pick up the phone to call us. And it was fun. I truly miss those days. And I shouldn't say, that those days are gone forever because we're continuously looking for new ways to improve our level of service, provide a different level of service. But it's just different, if you will.
Well,
So
it's matured and it's big.
yeah, right.
So I just shared this that, this year, this industry is now over $500 billion in size. That's
Wow.
what businesses and governments will spend on managed services contracts around the world. All 27 industries. We're at a point now where 87% of customers outsource some or all of their IT. And we're at a point, for those historians, we always debated, are there 30,000 MSPs? Are there 40,000? Is it growing into Europe? Like all those questions that used to be asked are now tracked to
Yeah,
the decimal point. We now have 335,000 companies with at least one managed contract. You can kind of see the bar
incredible.
chart here that, 43,000 of them have over 50% of their business recurring. I use 30%, so that drives the number to 86,000 globally. And something else interesting happened in this industry. If you go back 25 years to 1999, it's kind of my start date of when this started to come together, when the Bellinis got serious about, separating the MSP from the product. That's when Bob Gottgard and Bob Vogel and others up in Albany, New York, thought that this SaaS product that they built, who they were selling to plumbers, they were selling to HVAC, they were selling to anybody in a services organization.
Oh, were they really at that
Yeah,
time?
so
Okay.
there was a famous
Yeah.
meeting back then that Bob talks kindly about in the boardroom where they just shoved all their customers up on a PowerPoint slide, and they're trying to connect dots. Like how
Yeah.
would a plumber and HVAC and how would a flower shop and how would, how does this all make sense? And the idea was the most customers they had were in some type of IT services. And so
Incredible.
kind of one of the pivot moments any business makes, like we're not going to make it if we're trying to build for everybody. And we can't be all things to all people all the time. We're just a small group here in upstate New York. Let's go after, these resellers who are trying to cobble together something that's more predictable. And so by that day in 1999, it was kind of the decision to, hey, let's go
Yeah.
after this as a group. And then others came after, and the rest is history. But if you go back 25 years and you look at this, it's always been a North American phenomenon.
Yeah.
And I remember I was at Autotask, working for Autotask, when the decision was made to go hire 100 people in London. The new
Mm.
CEO who took over from Bob, Marchettini, came from Europe, worked for Lotus, had a good history in Europe. And he's like, why are Autotask and ConnectWise salespeople dialing into Europe? There's a big enough opportunity, and that could be a second thing. So why don't we do that? Why are they staying up all night dialing into Australia? Why, instead of enhancing the product or all the other go-to-market and other decisions you can make, why don't we just, go global? And so last year into this year is the first time ever that the rest of the world is bigger than North America. So you
Wow.
can see on the right that North America has now become the minority in managed services contracts, and it's truly a global business. If I kind of took it out to one more visual, just to give you the entire scope, the world economy is 105 trillion. The tech industry and telco below it is 5 trillion, makes up about 5% of world trade. But if you break free of kind of this 5 trillion, this is what businesses and governments, right from the smallest customer right up to the biggest banks and governments spend on tech, 2/3 of it is services. 1/3 of it you can see split almost evenly between hardware and software up in the upper right. But managed services is getting at the bottom a much bigger chunk of IT services. So, 548 is a material part, and it's now over 1 out of every $10 spent by every business and government in the world is on a managed contract. And so this industry is growing at 12%, which is double what the tech industry is growing at, which is 6%, which is double what the world economy is growing at this year, which is 2.9%. So we're absolutely in the right place. And if you can draw what I call now this trifecta, if you combine a business which is growing at 12% with, for example, cybersecurity, services are growing at 12% too, but managed security is growing at 15%. And then if you combine it with something like, edge that we just talked about, edge AI and, kind of a double-digit growth into next year. If I can combine 3 double-digit growing businesses and, good marketing, good selling, follow the bright minds on this call on how to really run a good business. There's no reason you can't be running a managed services business growing 20, 30, 40% with that trifecta. And so this is, we're watching this, we're asking customers, we're watching the partners, and I'm not sure out of the 297 sub-industries in the world that this might not be the best opportunity for the next 10 years. If I go back to kind of this trifecta, if I'm thinking about my business and positioning myself where customers are going to be spending, over the next 10 years, before I go and shut down everything I do and go all in on Gen AI, I probably want to make some, serious decisions on, where the opportunity is, and then double and triple click, make data-driven decisions. A little bit thumb in the sky, when you look into the future, but there's so many trends that are underway that you can actually make some pretty good futurist decisions. So one of the first things I ever did when I worked at IBM for 17 years is I became a futurist and joined the World Future Society. And there's people there predicting what the year 3000 is going to be like and debating Terminator 2 and stuff like that. But the best thing I ever learned being part of that society was, don't be fooled. There's so many trends that are currently underway that you're already watching and reading about. And then when you combine a bunch of trends together, the train is already on the tracks. The train is either, leaving the station or picking up speed. All you're doing is projecting the angle of, ascension of, how that's going to happen. Right. And you're going to be wrong, one way or the other, but usually you're not wrong on the broader prediction. So as an analyst, the trick of the trade, the cheat code here is, you kind of pick things that are, nobody predicted Gen AI, south of a year ago. Like there was no analyst at Gartner or Forrester standing up and saying, a year from now, we're all going to be talking about the end of our end of our careers, perhaps the end of our lives. We're going to be writing letters to governments. Nobody predicted that because the train wasn't on the tracks yet. The train wasn't picking up speed. So there was no way to project, kind of the trajectory of that. But now everybody and their dog has a Gen AI prediction, including us. So, people are really poor at predicting the future, but getting better at predicting, kind of where trends are going to go. And that's in managed services. We don't know what the next thing's going to be and whether it's a hit or a flop. Is it a metaverse? Is it an IoT? These things, while there is opportunities and they sounded interesting, were not managed services hits. And so the question, let's talk about those and would the hits be?
Well, as I say is, we continue to have conversations about how we need to stop having discussions about blinky lights. That all should be rock solid. We should be mature enough where, infrastructure wise, the things that, were always part of managed services should just be happening. The conversations that we need to shift towards are those business owner to business owner, business leader to business leader discussions about how we can leverage technology to make them more efficient, more productive, more profitable, and deliver a better customer experience. And I think the differentiating factor between those that will grow their MSP business and those that won't are the ones that truly capture those conversations and look to the future. I've always said, from day one in managed services to our prospective clients and our clients, there's 4 steps. We first have, that initial step of an assessment, identifying strengths and weaknesses in that organization. Step 2 is bringing things up to standards, right? So where we identify those weaknesses, bring their organization up to the standards they need to be in. Step 3 is management. So that ongoing TLC, the technology love and care that needs to happen to keep things running, because we can bring things up to standards, but unless we're continually giving that TLC, things will degrade. So we need to keep them up that. Most importantly, though, is step 4 is strategic planning. Working with that organization, identify their goals and objectives, and looking at how technology can help help them get to where those goals and objectives are. Because technology isn't their business, but it's a tool in their business that can help bring them to that level. And so I think, again, the MSPs that truly will grow and expand their businesses and not be commoditized are the ones that capture that.
Yeah, I completely agree. I would just add, into every one of those layers, make it data driven. So I showed in the pie chart that, for every dollar that, go back to here, for every dollar of the companies that we see in the news every day and the trillions of dollars of value, and we hold them up on pedestals, we write books about their CEOs, we collectively, almost like consumers, bow to the, giants.
Yeah.
As a channel, as a, global partner team, we generate $2 today for every dollar these companies do. The dollars that we're generating in services are outgrowing these companies.
Really?
This is amazing, because by the end of the decade, it's going to be $3 for every dollar. And at Canalys, like, one of our more profitable segments now is selling to each of these big names what we call the multiplier, which is actually publishing the bigger opportunity, how partners can multiply an opportunity. It's not the $2 per dollar or what could be a $3 per dollar. Every one of these companies now is publishing a bigger partner opportunity. So Salesforce, which is over on the right, who announces earnings in about 4 hours, was the first to do this at Dreamforce. So Mark Benioff, would get up and say, hey, for every dollar of Salesforce, this was years and years ago, there's $4 of opportunity. Well, today, the number at Salesforce is $6.19. And this was pretty shocking, because he kind of went anti-software and had the whole software with that line through it and stuff. But
yeah.
he also went anti, traditional thinking. I grew up in an era of client server where you never dared tell a customer what the total cost of ownership is, because it was really, really bad. And managed services, by the way, was kind of invented and became as big as it is because of how bad the Wintel client server era was for total cost of ownership. All Salesforce did is turned it around and said, I'm going to give you the number. And the number is $6.19. So if you're going to buy as a customer $100,000 of Salesforce CRM, you better have $700,000 in your budget to get it to work.
Wow.
And it's up to you. I have my customers here. I have my partners here. There's 220,000 partners of Salesforce. I have my employees here. We're all here. He called it Ohana, the Hawaiian kind of, we're all here as a family. And it's up to you as a customer to determine how much of that $6.19 you want to outsource or insource. I will tell you that it's not a good decision to insource at all. because you're not going to find the right talent in all the right places. You're not going to have security talent, AI talent, backup talent. You're not going to have tech talent in all the place. So go, make sure that you make the right decision. It also doesn't make sense to go outsource all of it. You don't want to be left high and dry as an organization with absolutely no Salesforce skills.
Right.
But what is that right medium? Should you be outsourcing $3 out of the 6, $4 out of the 6? Every company's different. But he was actually encouraging this whole idea of outsourcing in this Ohana moment, and given a bigger number where a services firm like an Accenture might go into a customer, a bigger customer, and say, charge them $300,000, where Salesforce only charged them $100,000 to get it to work. And so this multiplier, if I visualize the multiplier, as we started publishing them, actually looks like this. And an MSP will recognize this because in green, from the point of a new customer considering technology to the point they make a purchase, there's 28 definable, measurable moments. And we help. And this is where you said, engage in a business conversation. If it's a larger, customer, go talk to the vice presidents who make business application decisions. Go talk to the owner principal, go talk to the CFO if there is one, but go talk to people about how to really build their business. And in those moments of consulting and design and architecture work, configure, price quoting, those are monetized moments or potential, monetary moments that companies can charge for.
Well,
it's those, yep.
It's just interesting to break it down that way, especially when you talk about that $6.19. Curious, do you have data on that in relation to Office, or I should say Microsoft 365?
Yeah. So Microsoft is $7.63. If you're an ISV for Microsoft, it's actually over $10. So
okay.
Satya gets on the front of CRN magazine, and the title of the article is "We're Unlocking Trillions for the Channel."
Yeah.
And by unlocking trillions, Microsoft is not spending a nickel.
Right.
All they're basically doing is now telling the market that the opportunity, like to get Microsoft technology to work,
Yep.
you better have $7 in the bank for every dollar that you're spending. So we're basically advertising now our total cost of ownership. And we're telling in all these different areas, specific areas, before, during, and after the transaction, you want to make sure that you're doing these things properly. And if you don't feel you've got the right team, you've the right talent, the right access to make this repeatable and scalable, you better be accessing your partner network. And the average customer today, this is a big change from years ago. The average customer today at a medium size and larger has 7 partners they trust. So no longer is it a single throat to choke. Is it a trusted advisor? I grew up in the 90s at IBM where you couldn't get fired for it. By IBM. So those days are gone. And you don't have to be a big partner to participate in bigger deals. You just have to have those definable skills that are differentiated from the competition. And you could be sitting with a bunch of other partners. So if I look at this entire scale, there's hundreds and hundreds of services that aren't given away for free anymore because there's no money, at the point of sale, especially if it goes through a marketplace or something else. So, these all turn inside out back into that customer multiplier. So while Microsoft's $7.63, AWS is $6.40, Google's about closer to $6, HubSpot's $5.80. Almost every day we're publishing one of these for a Snowflake, a VMware. Today was HP. Every company's now kind of going out with this language where partners can go make more revenue than the vendor can in a particular solution and how to go do it.
Well, and the whole thought process, looking at it this way, changes so much because that conversation, with those business leaders changes because we're able to, help to identify what are those additional costs. I think back to year 2000, I was working for a company called Centerbeam, which was a startup out of Santa Clara that was what is considered managed services today with a HaaS program. So basically what we did is we would go in, we would replace all their technology, new HP workstations. I believe it were Lucent wireless. We only did wireless. There was no hardwired. We had a network operations center out of Santa Clara, and it was all priced at a $250, $300 plus per user per month. Well, in the year 2000, it was way ahead of its time. Nobody looked at their cost in a per user fashion like that. And we struggled. We struggled to give it away to nonprofits because, it was just a complete paradigm shift. And I think the challenge for a lot of SMBs when they take a look at, hey, we're going to, maybe move away from on-premise to the cloud, is they just look at that monthly subscription cost and they don't think about the investments that are necessary to set that up, to get it running and to keep it running. And having numbers like this, having some type of target to help them understand what those investments look like, I think is in some way a game changer in engaging them in the conversation of what those costs will be.
Yeah, absolutely. And I just want to go back to the 7 partners for a second.
Yeah.
There's not 7 MSPs surrounding a customer,
Right.
competing with each other. There's not 7 VARs. There's not 7 system integrators. What they do is they're very thoughtful in those first 28 moments of building a team of people that understand a bunch of things about them. For example, understand me as a buyer. There's many medium and mid-market sized customers today in the world that the CMO marketing officer spends more on technology than the CIO. So guess what? Who's served a CMO since the Breaking Bad days of the 50s? Who built their website 20, 30 years ago? Who got them on the front page of Google SEO 10 years ago? That digital agency is now 78% chance that they're a tech services company. And all their creative services and all the other stuff they do has been pushed to page 4 of their website. Another example on the right is that accounting firm. Your local accountants, CPA firms, there's an 81% chance now that they've converted their businesses to tech services. That's where they see the opportunity. All of the accounting, taxation, audit work that they do is at 17% EBITDA. It's a commodity. There's no way for them to grow, be more profitable other than crossing over, partnering up with QuickBooks, Sage, Dynamics, NetSuite, and moving their customers and doing that work in that big flywheel. What if as an accountant, I could go earn $1 in that $6 multiplier on top of every dollar they spend on technology, and now I'm intersecting. So the group on the right is who took advantage of SaaS. SaaS is now a $278 billion industry. It's still growing at 20 to 30%. And it's been almost invisible to managed services. The only, SaaS that really managed services took advantage of is Office 365 and more prepackaged kind of legacy software that got prepackaged in a subscription. But in the true sense of Salesforce, ServiceNow, Workday, Marketo, NetSuite, the amount of managed services and MSP work within almost $1 trillion of services has been very, very low. Different buyer. Remember, SaaS is bought by lines of business, marketing people and salespeople and CX people and operational and finance and HR. They're the ones that buy 75% of it. But they're not backing it up. It's not secure. They don't know what the heck to do with the AI functionality that's quickly coming into it. There's an opening here, and there's another dollar to be made on every dollar the customer spends for managed service providers just to get into, obviously, a new buyer, but a new market. On the left, 250,000 ISVs now, 1 million emerging tech companies. This thing's just absolutely insane with millions of companies competing. now for those 7 seats around every buyer in that 5 trillion. So gone are the days, though, you got to win the trusted advisor, that single throat to choke. You just have to join a team. So one of the advice a lot of times when I'm asked is, the next time you sign into a client and you're signing into the guest book, if they allow you to, flip a couple pages back. There's an 80% chance that every single person signing into that client is talking tech. And next time you look at your Chamber of Commerce, next time you look at those local meetup events, and next time you think about talking to your accountant or your lawyer, there's probably an 80% chance that they could work with you and 1 + 1 could equal 3. You could help in their clients, they could help in your clients. And the more teamwork that's built at a local level, and these pre-built teams, could come in and really expand your own sales and marketing. This is how big the tech channel is now. And this is the new language, this coded language, a multiplier that everybody's after.
So the 86,546 for MSPs there, what is that? What is that number? Is that, it says global up top?
Yep. Those are global. I had the original chart here. If you add the first 2 columns, so more than 30% of revenue recurring and using professional tools.
Okay.
PSA, RMM. It doesn't mean you're using the top 3 or 4. It just means that you've got repeatable operations. You've got workflows. You've got processes. You're not just a website and, a reseller, that taped over their white van. But no, if you actually look at a serious business who's committed to the model and is doing material revenue in the model and has the structure and tools to grow, it's 86,000 now, MSPs.
Okay.
And, another 250,000 that are hot on the heels of growing. So I'm saying that old Microsoft channel, that old Compaq IBM channel of the 80s into the 90s, almost 2/3 of it now has 1 managed contract. We always talked about the Microsoft channel of, 500,000 VARs in the world. And we always discussed here in North America, like, what if we converted everybody? What if we really sold managed services, the next big thing? Well, I think 2/3 of people are now at the point where they have at least 1 contract and are trying to grow into this area.
Okay.
The other thing on resell is, we've been predicting for 43 years. In the 80s, I remember paying out 40% margins on a PC. In the 90s, it was 30%, then 20, then 10, then 5. But marketplaces in the last couple of years have been growing at 86% compounded, not in hardware, but in software. But marketplaces did something that will forever, readjust how consumers, how customers think about buying a product. And what they did is readjusted the margin to 3. Microsoft did it first, Google followed, AWS followed, everybody's kind of forced to follow. But the cost of resell is the exact same as running your credit card at a restaurant, 3%. It's what you pay Microsoft and the other 17 companies behind them, Microsoft, MasterCard, et cetera. So if collecting a customer's money, taking on the risk that they're not going to pay, taking on the time value of money, net 30, net 60, net 90, net never, taking on the cost of hiring Biff to break knees when they don't pay, especially with, partnering with Microsoft, where they shift the risk to you if they don't pay and you have to pay out their contract. All that is now worth 3. And that's been told to the end buyer pretty clearly. And it hasn't caught up in many categories yet, but it will. In the next 10 years, every customer is going to know that transacting for a hardware, software, or even services product and the hard costs in between, behind it, is the same as Visa or MasterCard. 3. And so that's why marketplaces are growing at 86% compounded. I'll just give a couple stats there, picking on AWS for a second. We thought that AWS, this was years ago, we thought that they would be a top 10 distributor in the world by 2025. This is up with TD SYNNEX and Ingram. Here in the US, we have D&H, Arrow, et cetera. We thought they'd join that, out of 500 big distributors, they'd be in the top 10 in only a couple of years. Well, they beat that prediction by 2 years. They already became top 10, and now they're probably top 7. And while TD SYNNEX and Ingram are larger than Nike and Coca-Cola and Starbucks and all these McDonald's, all these companies we know and love, they're really, really big companies. AWS is approaching that. There are big vendors such as Palo Alto, CrowdStrike, Snowflake, Splunk that have issued press releases that they're doing $1 billion on AWS each.
Wow.
So again, marketplaces are kind of one of the data points behind this resale revenue going to 3. But the multiplier is the other part of it. You see how small this procurement circle is. And it doesn't preclude the fact that there's still a 6x multiplier in most of these technology categories. So most partners, at least mature partners, are starting to ask their vendors a different question. Instead of my ability to make 10 or 20% of the deal, whatever your margin structure is, and whatever MDF funds and other spiffs or whatever else you're running, instead of that, what's my opportunity to make 300% of the deal at 75% margins? What are the skills I need? What competencies, what certifications, where do I need to align my business? Because Microsoft, I want to make more than you.
Right.
You're going to make 100 grand. I'm going to make 200. And that's the kind of business I want to go build. And that's, private equity and everybody else right now. That's who's valuing revenue right now, is those companies who are multiplying the $1 trillion, darlings in the industry. Yeah. And I think that, distribution isn't laying down either. The idea is, Ingram, acquired Cloud Blue. They built out the whole infrastructure with a number of acquisitions to have a really good marketplace. TD SYNNEX has done the same. PAX 8's coming out with all kinds of announcements. D&H, has a whole team dedicated. So the idea is you don't have to use a Microsoft marketplace, but you do want to have the capabilities, of being, highly automated, having, a lot of, I'm going to say repeatable, reliable, scalable kind of processes in doing that.
Yeah.
We're not chasing POs anymore. We're not trying to fax over orders. We're not tracing and tracking things. We want to have the tools at our fingertips, and the customer really shouldn't care whether the order was issued on a AWS marketplace or a PAX 8 marketplace.
Right.
They should trust their partner to go make that decision on their behalf. And how money changes hands. If it goes through Microsoft's marketplace, the money comes through a private offer. Or if it goes through a distributor marketplace, it comes through margin. The fact of the matter is, those are kind of nickels and dimes of each deal, when we should be talking about dollars of multiplier and making sure we're positioned, in all of these different hundreds of services before, during, and after, especially in subscription. Now, the procurement stage in subscription consumption businesses is the first 30 days with the client. And we as managed services providers know that the enrichment of that every 30 days forever, the land and expand, as SaaS companies call it, is where the money is. Even Microsoft put 2/3 of all their program dollars post-sale.
Yeah.
Because the retention, the renewal, this is how Microsoft outgrew Apple as the richest company in the world, the most valuable. Convincing Wall Street that they don't rely on a September launch of a product and have to sell a ton of it by Christmas.
Right.
More boring than that. And you can set your watch to the revenue and the growth. And the renewal rate at Microsoft's 108%, thanks to the channel.
Yeah.
So for every customer they lose, they double up a bunch of other customers. So that's what makes valuable companies today. It's called platform economics. And every company in every industry and every one of your clients, in the end, are trying to achieve more platform status in front of their buyer.
Leveraging those marketplaces, see if you can consolidate and drive that through a marketplace. Like you mentioned, like a PAX 8, that gives you a lot more ability to control gives you more of that peace of mind, that comfort.
Yeah, absolutely. So, I mean, the only thing really to walk away from today is there's a lot of data. The good news with data, like I'm going to say a few years ago, I used to work at Forrester, one of the big analyst firms. Everything's behind a paywall. It's like going to read the news and you can't even read an article without, signing up for 99 cents or whatever. The data today is actually getting pushed outside the firewall. The content and kind of the data isn't as valuable or kind of restricted as it's been in the past. You can go and get all kinds, like mountains of data just for my firm for free about your business, about your business model, about, pretty much every question you'd possibly have. Almost every day we survey 20,000 partners about, things. You can sign up for that. And it's not behind a paywall anymore. The questions, though, and this is why this community is so good, and the work that you and the team do, Dan, is that the data is not important and the content isn't important. It's the customization of it. It's the personalization of it. What does this mean to me? I've got 5 employees. I'm in Wichita, Kansas. All this talk about trillion-dollar companies, is fun, to read in the newspaper and talk to my friends because I'm the tech expert in town. But in the end, I got to run a business and I got to make decisions, and, every minute of the day is precious. So let's take in all of this and all the FUD and fun we've heard about Gen AI in a year. And as a group discuss, is this, for the precious moments of the day, should I be invested in furthering my managed services practices? Like you mentioned at the top, Dan. Should I be getting a couple of more cybersecurity, certifications or competencies? Should I be going in deeper in, particular problem? It's all about opportunity cost. And the one lever obviously is financial cost, but the other lever is time. And it's usually time is the most important one. We can't do all things. We can't be thinking $5 trillion and we have 750,000 employees like Accenture does to just go and check every box. I just got to make good decisions. We're midway through 2024 now, and for all the doom and gloom that people had going into the year, I mean, we're going to make it out okay. We're in double-digit growth, but in 2025, I mean, we could double or triple the size of our company in the next 18 months if we make good data-driven decisions and learn from what others are doing, what's working, what isn't, and maybe taking advantage of some of this data that maybe hasn't been available in the past to go have these conversations.
So let's talk a little bit about AI. Right. Everybody has some kind of AI solution today. Everybody's fearful that, and I say everybody, I shouldn't say it, everybody, there's a lot of buzz around how AI is going to, eliminate jobs and, it's going to have an impact on our economy and so on. Love to hear some of your thoughts of where you see AI having an impact and where it will make some changes to the way we view MSP work.
Let me just bring up a couple of slides. I love visuals, as everybody can probably attest to at this point. I personally am not an auditory learner. I tend to be a visual learner. So let me bring this up. All right, so right when, kind of AI last March was in its consumer frenzy, it was on CNN and the New York Times, and we had to get smart really, really fast about it because our customers, our friends, our family, our neighbors, started popping over asking us about it.
Well, everybody thought we've been doing it for 5 years.
Yeah, well, I worked at IBM. I was there on the Deep Blue team that beat Kasparov at chess in '96. I remember 11 years later, going after Jeopardy. And by the way, Jeopardy was was actually a generative AI problem. It was actually two AI problems. One was speed. You only have milliseconds determine whether you know the answer or not. It's kind of the way the human brain works as well. You've got a response to hit the button, whether if I got a couple more seconds, does somewhere in my gray matter up there have the answer? You don't have it in a flash, in a blink. But if I got a couple seconds to process the question and kind of go search the reserves of my brain, I might. But the same thing for a computer was, it's almost the Google search. And what is the confidence rate at the results we got within milliseconds, that given 4 more seconds, I'd be able to, in a generative AI way, speak an answer or in the form of a question. So it was a 2-part problem. Google search results, 90% confidence rate, hit the button. Alex Trebek's gives you 4 more seconds. And then you got to go read the internet cover to cover and, click on every link, read every article, do all the pattern matching, come back with an answer. And, proved many, many years ago, like 13 years ago, that a computer could defeat humans in generative AI. But yes, last March, it became the consumer trend when all of our neighbors wrote poetry and created music and wrote, papers for school. It became this thing. So we automatically started thinking it. We were kind of, pushed by big trillion-dollar companies. This is going to be, $4 trillion. Whole world economy is only 105. But, here's this massive thing. It's life-changing. Every single trillion-dollar CEO piled on top of each other, talking about what great partnership opportunity and how great this would be for partners. The interesting, thing is that these are the companies that are making the money on it as well. And, most of the economic growth in terms of market capitalization and shareholder value has gone only to a couple of companies. You just watch NVIDIA, for example, and $2.5 trillion valuation.
Right.
But behind all these like really massive scale things, and then it didn't help when Bill Gates came along and said this is going to be bigger than the PC. Steve Wozniak came along and said this is going to be bigger than the iPhone. This triggered a moment for all of us that maybe this isn't another IoT or metaverse moment. Maybe this is game changing, and more of us thought about it as tech people and go, I do think this is game changing. But now how does this play out for us? And, again, somebody that's fact-based would go back and count all the numbers from last year and say, well, the entire, million channel partners out there cashed in about $15 billion. And guess what? By, looking forward, the train is on the tracks, it's picking up speed. A 59% compounded growth rate is one of the highest growth rates in our industry. So the opportunity's there. So then you start asking the question, where? Every day we're polling all kinds of, MSPs and bars around the world. And, people are on the fence and people are kind of in the middle. And some people think it's a good opportunity. And this is a comparison from 5 years ago. But we're still a skeptical audience. We've lived through these big life-changing moments. And many of them didn't play out. Most of them didn't play out. So again, It takes a while to change the skepticism. One of the key things that makes this different than every other moment. And if I go and look at IoT, if I look at automation or robotics, if I go look at quantum computing, I could look at crypto, Bitcoin, I can look at metaverse, self-driving cars, whatever future tech you want to look at on the Gartner hype cycle, none of them present the internal opportunity that generative AI does right out of the gate. So for the first time in a peer group like this, you start to think about your own marketing, sales, customer success. You start thinking about your invoicing, your billing. You start thinking about your service tickets. Every single part of your business could be improved almost immediately with generative AI in the tools that, in the models as they exist today. And forget about the exponential growth in them. And as our people that we're partnered with start to generate, add buttons and features into the products we use, the tools we use, it's going to be an internal battle of how do I get better than the competitor across the street before I ever talk to a customer about this.
Right.
How do I make my own business more efficient, more automated, better workflows? How do I get more profitable out of the gate in the right ways? I'm not going to put out a chatbot that replaces my customer service because it's not ready yet. But there's a bunch of things I should be talking about where I can pilot and test and plan for, small improvements, literally out of the gate. Then back to the flywheel. Let's go talk to the customer about all these $158 billion in services that are going to be created. We kind of stack ranked all of them and, took hundreds of services, put them on a timeline over 5 years, ranked them by, barrier to entry, profitability, competitiveness, and all the other things. And, my conclusion, which I got a chance with this research to speak at AWS reInvent, at Google Next, at Microsoft Inspire, on stage, in front of big Vegas audiences. And I basically said, put a 2-year moratorium on the traditional channel. Don't get too excited about this because the timing isn't right. Every single customer, and it's top down here, by the way, the biggest banks, the biggest governments, the biggest companies with those capabilities are the ones in heavy planning mode and the ones that can afford consulting around this, rather than just fun conversations at the hall, at the water fountain.
Right.
The serious companies that are designing and architecting pilots are well up in the Fortune-sized or in bigger governments. So if I look at the entire client base of SMB and everything else, this is going to take years to play out. And on the left-hand side, today, it is truly the GSIs, the globals, Accenture, Deloitte, Capgemini, KPMG, E&Y. I mean, they're the ones cashing in on the tens of billions of dollars today of customers who write those big checks. Bank of America, Wells Fargo, etc.
Would you say that, when we take a look at AI, I think most people think about Chat GPT, right?
Mm-hmm.
That I think is what, has given a taste of what AI can be, right? I mean, that's clearly not just, I think a lot of people think that's AI, but there's so much more to it. There's so much more integration and depth to AI in every business. And like you said, it's only the big players that are really tapping into it. But I mean, it's given people enough of a taste, SMBs enough of a taste to be able to see it and to see real life use cases, and it will grow. It's like you're saying, it's just going to take time for it to be able to, the true AI functionality that's fully baked in and integrated into their businesses won't be overnight. I mean, outside of the ability to, go to Chat GPT and try to, and be able to do things, whether it's Gemini or Copilot, be able to do things that you couldn't do before. Is that a fair, kind of assumption from that perspective?
Yeah, and it's probably a great way to close off the session by saying, this is staged and it's kind of different opportunities, but every single person in every single company, including ours, has the ability to make their jobs better, more efficient, make the customer experience better. I mean, generative AI is literally a horizontal technology that lifts all boats. The fact of the matter, the implementation, and more importantly for us, the monetization of it, is not the same. So when all of us, the 250,000 SaaS tools that we use every day, regardless of who we are, will have new buttons and new capabilities. That email we used to type ourselves now has a button for that. That workflow that we used to have to click and drag and move to an Excel sheet and move, there's going to be a button for that. So that's where the second opportunity here is for every ISV. And this includes ConnectWise, Kaseya, Enable, Ninja, just raised $230 million, includes SuperOps, it includes Altier, everybody. All 25 PSA and RMM companies are actively with not only ChatGPT, but Claude with Anthropic, with Gemini, with Google, with looking at Einstein with Salesforce. I mean, they're actively looking at how their product and our lives get better. Through software, though. Again, we're not monetizing that, but we can take advantage of it internally.
Right.
The data services, getting closer to Snowflake, Databricks, Datadog, companies like that. There's absolutely new practices around data warehousing, data lakes, data cleansing, data that require to feed and train and tune these language models. But again, it changes our business. Many of us don't have data practices like we do have security practices and other things today. It's a decision we have to make. That's third. And then down the road, and this is the one statistic I use to everybody, including on stage with the hyperscalers, 85% of the world's data, business data, and what's going to make Gen AI magic sits on premises. 85%. There is no CEO of any, including OpenAI or any of them, that think we're forklifting that data into the cloud.
Right.
There's no room in the cloud. It's consuming too much fresh water, too much electricity at this point, and there's just no scale that's going to happen at the cloud level. Processing, storage, networking at the edge is where the true life-changing, bigger than the PC, bigger than the smartphone, agricultural revolution, industrial revolution type things come when we tap the 85. MSPs are going to be at the tip of the spear, at the edge, tipping that 85. We're still 2 years away from that. Nobody trusts their core business data, putting into some consumer thing that writes poetry and all the hallucinations that come from that.
Right.
So before you give up any moment thinking about cybersecurity growing at 12, managed services growing at 12, edge AI PCs growing at double digits next year, before you think about the opportunities in front of you to grow your business 20 or 30% next year, stay up to speed, watch closely, follow the data, and 2 or 3 quarters before this thing starts to tip, let's have that conversation. And I'll get back on Wednesday and we'll have the conversation at that point.
All right, everybody, there we have it. I want to thank Jay McBain for your time today, helping to educate us about some of the trends taking place in the managed services workspace. Also great, kind of reminiscing about some of the early on days of our careers in the channel. Everybody, thank you for being here with us today. Hope you enjoyed today's session. We will talk to you all soon. Have a great day. Take care.